I stared at the mirror in my bridal suite, veil trembling in my hands, heart pounding like a war drum. Outside, laughter and clinking glasses echoed through the walls of the venue. But inside, the air was thick with the scent of betrayal, my betrayal. Just 12 hours ago, I was tangled in bed with Liam. Not my fiancé. His brother. His older, forbidden, devastatingly broken brother. The one who whispered, "You don't love him the way you pretend to." And I didn't stop him. I didn't say no. I didn't even flinch when he kissed me. I wanted it. God, I wanted it. And now, here I am, dressed in white, walking toward a man who paid for this entire fairy tale, who adores me, who is waiting at the altar with nothing but trust in his eyes. Meanwhile, the one I can't stop thinking about is sitting in the second row, jaw clenched, eyes burning into me like fire. As I take my first step down the aisle, I realize this isn't a love story. It's a slow-motion car crash, and I'm the one behind the wheel. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you're alone, because this story gets darker than you think. I met Matthew first. That's the part that always haunts me. If I had met Liam before him, maybe this would be a different story. But life doesn't work that way. Life is cruel and strange and precise with its timing. I was 26, working a thankless PR job in Midtown, barely sleeping, barely living. Then came Matthew, charming, dependable, golden retriever energy in a custom suit. He made everything feel easy. Dates were perfect, dinners expensive, conversations light. Within 6 months, we were living together. Within a year, he proposed under a canopy of fairy lights in Napa. Everyone said yes for me before I even opened my mouth. I didn't meet Liam until 3 months after the proposal. Matthew's older brother. He was late to the engagement dinner, said he'd just flown in from Lisbon. I still remember the moment he walked in, rumpled white shirt, 2 buttons undone, leather jacket slung over one shoulder. He didn't look like Matthew. He looked like a man who had seen too much, survived too much. His smile wasn't rehearsed like Matthew's, it was hesitant, sarcastic, knowing. He gave me a once-over that felt like being unzipped without being touched. And that night, while Matthew introduced me to the rest of the family, Liam stayed on the patio, drinking alone. At first, I thought he hated me. And maybe he did. He barely spoke to me during holidays. He'd show up late, leave early, always with a new woman on his arm. But when we were alone, those rare, stolen moments, he'd ask questions no one else dared to. "Are you happy with him?" he asked once, as we stood near the kitchen sink at Christmas, his voice low and venom soft. I lied. Of course. He looked at me like he already knew the truth. The more I tried to avoid Liam, the more I couldn't stop thinking about him. His voice. His laugh. The way he never looked at me like I was some prize to win, like Matthew did, but rather, like I was a secret he already knew. And then came the Vegas trip, Matthew's bachelor weekend. I wasn't even supposed to go, but Matthew insisted I join them halfway through for a combined celebration. That was the first night Liam and I were truly alone. In the hallway of a hotel that smelled like cheap perfume and regret, he touched my wrist and said, "You don't love him." My silence was a confession. And he kissed me. Hard. Wrong. Perfect. We didn't sleep together that night. But something had shifted. From that point on, every glance was a loaded weapon, every accidental touch a sin. I kept telling myself I was just nervous about the wedding. Cold feet, nothing more. But deep down, I knew, if I had to choose between the two of them without the history, the expectations, the families, I'd choose Liam. Every time. The week before the wedding was chaos. My mom flew in, my bridesmaids were buzzing like bees, and Matthew was busy finalizing the venue. He was so proud of every little detail. "You don't need to worry about anything," he kept telling me. "I've got it all covered." And he did. He paid for the venue, the band, the dress, even flew in my grandmother from Italy. The perfect man, right? But then, the night before the wedding, everything exploded. Matthew had gone to stay with his groomsmen. I was at the bridal suite, alone, going over my vows. There was a knock on the door. I thought it was one of my bridesmaids. But it was Liam. He didn't say a word. Just walked in, eyes bloodshot, like he hadn't slept. He held a bottle of scotch and 2 glasses. "Can't sleep either?" he asked, like this was normal. I should have said no. I should have kicked him out. But I didn't. I poured us both a drink. We sat on the floor, back against the bed, in silence. Then he said it. The sentence that destroyed me. "Do you ever think you made the safe choice?" My throat closed. "Matthew's good to me." I didn't ask that. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. And maybe I was seeing myself, too. The girl who always followed the plan. The girl who mistook security for love. And then, God help me, I leaned in. Our mouths met like we'd been waiting a decade. His hands were rough, demanding, pulling me into something feral and inevitable. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It was a storm. Clothes off. Breathless gasps. 1,000 silent apologies echoing between our bodies. And in the afterglow, while I lay there tangled in sheets that weren't mine, Liam whispered, "You don't have to go through with it." But I did. Or at least, I thought I did. Because by morning, everything was different. The morning of the wedding felt like a dream stitched together with panic and denial. My skin still smelled like him. No amount of lavender soap or scrubbing erased the truth. I kept replaying his voice in my head, "You don't have to go through with it." But I did. I had to. Didn't I? The bridal suite was chaos. Curling irons, champagne flutes, my mother crying over how beautiful I looked. I nodded and smiled and tried not to collapse. My heart was a traitor, beating for a man I should have never touched. And the worst part? Liam had vanished. No messages. No knocks. No sign of last night ever happening. Until he showed up. 15 minutes before the ceremony. I was alone, dressed in white, staring out the window at the guests arriving. That's when I saw his reflection in the mirror behind me. Liam. Dressed in black, like he was going to a funeral instead of a wedding. Ours, maybe. He didn't knock. Just closed the door quietly behind him. His voice was low, like gravel dragging through fire. "You look unreal." I didn't turn around. "You shouldn't be here." "I know." He stepped closer. My spine stiffened. The air between us was electric, dangerous. "Why'd you come?" I whispered. "Because I needed to see you. One last time. Before you disappear forever." I turned to face him. His eyes were unreadable, wounded. "It was a mistake," I said, even though every part of me screamed the opposite. He flinched. "You don't believe that?" "I have to." He took another step. We were inches apart. My lipstick trembled. "You love him?" he asked. My silence stretched between us like barbed wire. And then he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't like the night before, wild and furious. This kiss was slow. Final. A goodbye sealed with guilt. I melted into it, my body betraying every promise I'd made. And just as quickly, it ended. He stepped back, eyes burning, and said the words that broke me. "You're choosing a life that's not yours." Then he left. I sank to the floor, dress billowing around me like a lie I couldn't climb out of. My maid of honor found me 10 minutes later, mascara running, voice shaking. "You okay?" I nodded. Lie after lie. When the music started and the doors opened, I walked down the aisle like a ghost. Matthew looked perfect. Smiling. Handsome. Oblivious. He mouthed, "You're beautiful." And I smiled back like I hadn't just kissed his brother behind a locked door. The ceremony blurred. Vows. Rings. Applause. But when the priest asked, "Do you take this man?" I hesitated. It was a second. Just one. But Liam saw it. I caught his face in the crowd, jaw clenched, hands tight in his lap. And I said, "I do." I did. To a man who adored me. To a man who paid for every flower, every plate, every second of this disaster. And all I could think about was the man sitting 3 rows back, holding a secret that could shatter it all. The reception was a blur. Toasts, dances, polite laughter. I kept glancing over at Liam, hoping he'd leave, praying he wouldn't. And then, during the father-daughter dance, he disappeared. I panicked. I told Matthew I needed air, stepped out into the cold night, and found him outside near the service entrance, chain-smoking. His jacket was gone. He looked ruined. "What are you doing out here?" I asked. He exhaled smoke like a warning. "Making sure I don't ruin your big day." I wanted to scream. "Why'd you kiss me?" "Because I'm in love with you, that's why." My world tilted. "You think I planned any of this?" he snapped. "You think I wanted to fall for my brother's fiancé? Do you know how sick that is?" I stepped closer, ignoring the ache in my chest. "So what now?" He laughed bitterly. "Now? You go back in there. You dance. You smile. And you pretend none of this ever happened. That's what good people do, right?" I slapped him. Hard. And then I kissed him again. Because I wasn't a good person. Not anymore. When I finally walked back into the reception, Matthew pulled me into a hug. "Where'd you go?" "I just needed a second," I lied. Again. He smiled. "Everything okay?" And I said the words I would regret for the rest of my life, perfect. But perfection doesn't last. Not when the truth is clawing its way through the seams. It only took 9 days. 9 days of pretending. Smiling in Instagram posts. Holding Matthew's hand in bed while flinching every time he said I love you. I thought I could carry the secret to my grave. I convinced myself it was just one mistake, buried under white lace and champagne bubbles. But secrets don't rot quietly. They grow teeth. It started small. Matthew noticed how distant I was. How I flinched when he touched me too softly. How I never looked him in the eyes when we made love. I told him I was tired. Wedding stress. Hormones. But the lie tasted like glass every time I swallowed it. Then came Sunday brunch. His parents invited us over. Liam was there, of course, late as usual, wearing that same half-wrecked look he always had. But something was different. He wouldn't look at me. Not once. Not even when he hugged Matthew and said, "Congrats again." His eyes slid right past me like I didn't exist. I told myself it was better this way. Safer. Cleaner. But my heart didn't agree. It ached. Pounded. It wanted the wreckage back. The chaos. Him. Then, over mimosas and smoked salmon, Matthew's mom made a toast. "To our newest daughter," she said, raising her glass, "you've brought so much joy into this family. Especially to Liam, right, sweetheart?" The table chuckled. Except Liam. He stood up. Walked away. Matthew followed. I froze. Watched the two of them disappear into the hallway like a fuse burning out of sight. 10 minutes passed. 15. 20. Then Matthew came back. Something in him had shifted. His smile was stiff. Eyes unfocused. He sat beside me and squeezed my hand too hard. "I'm not feeling great," he said through clenched teeth. "Can we go?" I nodded, heart hammering. In the car, he was silent. No music. No small talk. Just static tension thick enough to strangle us both. When we pulled into our driveway, he didn't get out. Just stared ahead. "Did something happen?" I asked, barely breathing. He finally turned to me, voice quiet and cold. "Did you sleep with my brother?" I could have lied. God, I could have lied. But I didn't. My mouth opened, and the truth fell out like blood. Yes. Silence. Then a slow, bitter laugh. He leaned back against the seat, tears brimming in his eyes. When? The night before the wedding. That was the moment he shattered. He didn't scream. Didn't hit anything. Just nodded slowly, like he'd known deep down but needed to hear it. "And you still married me. I thought I could bury it. You thought I wouldn't matter." "No," I whispered. "I thought you deserved better." He got out of the car and slammed the door so hard the windows shook. I sat there, frozen, until the sky turned pink with shame. The next week was a war zone. Matthew moved into the guest room. He didn't speak to me unless he had to. Liam disappeared, blocked me on everything. His parents were confused. My friends were texting me with concern I couldn't explain. I told them I was sick. Which was true. Just not the kind of sick they thought. I tried apologizing. Over and over. Letters. Voicemails. I even left a note in his work bag. But Matthew wasn't having it. "You don't get to cry," he said one night when I broke down in the kitchen. "You don't get to make yourself the victim." I nodded. I deserved every word. The worst part? I still missed Liam. Missed the way he looked at me like he knew me, even when I hated myself. But he was gone. Vanished like smoke through fingers. One night, drunk and numb, I called him. It rang once, then voicemail. I left a message I don't even remember. But I do remember the one that came back, 3 days later. "Don't contact me again." 10 words. That's all I got. Matthew filed for annulment 2 weeks later. Told everyone it was irreconcilable differences. He didn't expose me. Didn't destroy my reputation. Which somehow made it worse. He had every right to burn me to the ground, and he didn't. That's the kind of man I betrayed. I moved out of the apartment that month. Took the couch in a friend's living room. Every night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd just destroyed the only version of happiness I'd ever had. Not because I didn't love Matthew, but because I didn't love him enough. And because I wanted something wilder. Something truer. Even if it broke everyone around me. But nothing prepared me for what happened 6 months later. 6 months had passed. I had a new job. A new apartment. A new version of myself, colder, quieter, a little thinner from sleepless nights and too much wine. I didn't check their socials. I couldn't. I knew Liam had blocked me, and I suspected Matthew had too. Part of me hoped they'd both moved on. The rest of me prayed they hadn't. Pathetic, I know. Then I got the call. It was Matthew's mother. Her voice was cracked glass. "Liam's gone," she said. I didn't understand. Gone? He passed last night. It was sudden. There was a silence so heavy it could have broken bones. I asked how, but she didn't answer. The funeral was 3 days later. I almost didn't go. I wasn't sure I had the right. But something in me needed to. Maybe to say goodbye. Maybe to punish myself. I don't know. It rained, of course. Like something out of a cheap novel. I stood at the back, black coat soaked, face hidden under a white umbrella. The casket was dark mahogany. His parents were broken. Matthew stood like a statue beside them, pale, rigid, unreadable. He saw me. Our eyes locked for a second too long. And then, he looked away. I didn't expect anything more. I waited until almost everyone had left to approach the grave. The ground was still soft. Fresh. I knelt, numb fingers brushing the edge of the earth. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "For everything." A shadow appeared beside me. I turned, heart slamming. It was Matthew. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His suit hung loose. Eyes hollow. You shouldn't be here, he said, voice flat. I know. He stared at the grave, then at me. You think you knew him? I don't know, I whispered. He was messed up. Always was. But you were different with him. I saw it. I held my breath. He told me, Matthew added. After the wedding. What? The day after. He came clean. Said it was his fault. Said you tried to stop it. That's not true. I know. His voice broke. But he needed me to forgive him, so I did. Tears welled in my throat. Did you hate me? I wanted to. But no. I hated him. Because he always got to be the one people felt for. I was the one people settled for. I shook my head, trembling. That's not true. He laughed bitterly. Isn't it? We stood in silence, rain dripping from his lashes. I miss him, I said. He nodded. Me too. Then he reached into his coat and handed me a letter, folded, worn, sealed with Liam's handwriting. I found this in his apartment, Matthew said. He never sent it. But I think you should read it. And then he walked away. I didn't open it until I got home. My hands were shaking. The letter was short. I knew it would never work. Not with us. Not in this life. But I loved you. In the wrong way, at the wrong time, but I loved you. I hope one day you forgive yourself. I couldn't. L. I read it 5 times before I finally let myself cry. Ugly, gasping sobs that echoed through my empty apartment. And that was the last I ever heard from either of them. Matthew eventually moved to another city. Got remarried, I heard. She's beautiful. Stable. Everything I never was. As for me, I live in fragments. Some days I believe I made a mistake. Other days, I believe I was the mistake. But every time I walk past a church, or a man in a leather jacket, or a wedding dress in a store window, I remember. Not the dress. Not the kiss. But the way Liam looked at me that night. Like he knew I was about to ruin everything. And still, he let me.